Right, I think it's a couple of minutes past the half hour, so I think that we will make a start. Other people may join. Thank you to everybody for muting on arrival. That is the precursor to being allowed into this webinar stroke meeting. We will try to kind of manage that as we go, but as I say, we are very keen to get some interaction with you all. We've got a really good panel today, and we're keen to kind of hear any questions as we go. So firstly, welcome. Thank you for joining today. Really delighted to be joined by our expert panel listed on the PowerPoint slide that hopefully you can see on your screen. We're going to be focusing today on maximising social value through your local supply chain. We've got some people on the call today, individuals who have registered, who I know are kind of very familiar with this on a day-to-day basis, and our panelists absolutely kind of living and breathing this on a day-to-day basis too. A couple of just points of order as we go. We are recording this meeting today, so the intention is to record this and share it kind of early next week, and so it will be available for you to listen back to and also to share with colleagues if you wish. So you will get notified once that's live. Q&A, we, as I said to a few of you who are in the room a little earlier, we are going to try and do that kind of as we go. If you do have a question, if you raise your hand, I will do my best to look through the kind of participant list, highlight anyone who has raised their hand, and at an appropriate time try to bring you in. If we can't do that, what we will do is post meeting, we will contact you, get details of your question. We can pitch that to the panel outside of the meeting, and we will look to respond to you directly. So if we can't do that as part of the meeting, then we'll certainly aim to do that post meeting and make sure that you kind of get the responses that you need. I think everybody, as I said, has kind of put themselves on mute. Please don't be offended if you are off mute and I mute you, because I think allegedly I have the power to do that as the host. I haven't worked out how, so let's hope I don't have to use it. And what I want to do first, really, is I just want to pass over to the panel just to introduce themselves. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around the panel who are on the call today, just to give a short overview of name and their organisation that they're from and their kind of bit and a little bit of background. So first passing over to Sarah McNabb, who is Head of Social Value at Bloom.
Hi, thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. Yeah, just as Paul said, I'm Sarah McNabb, Head of Social Value here at Bloom Procurement Services. My role within the business is to lead and manage our social value programme. And one of the main elements to my role is to actively engage with our customers, just to understand sort of their social value requirements, and also following those conversations, engaging with our supply chain to discuss any upcoming opportunities from the public sector.
Thanks, Sarah. Darren.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Darren Now, Chief Procurement Officer at the County Council in Durham, where I lead a team of about 25 people, and we spend about £500 million a year on goods, works and services. I also lead procurement nationally with the LGA, the Local Government Association, as chair of the LGA National Advisory Group. And also within that work, I'm also chair of what is called the LGA National Social Value Task Force, which is around about 40 odd different people, organisations who come together, working with some very clever people from the Social Value Portal. And that group of people developed the, if you're familiar with them, the National TOMS, Themes, Outcomes and Measures. Pleased to meet you all.
Thanks, Darren. Stephen, over to you.
Hi everyone. Firstly, thank you Paul and the team at NEPO for the invite here today. I'm Stephen Sinclair, Procurement and Commercial Director at NEPO. NEPO being the North East Procurement Organisation, and we represent the kind of procurement interests of the 12 local authorities based across the North East, and really facilitate coming together where collaboration is the best thing to do. And a big part of what we deliver is social value, and more of that to come as we go through the session.
Thanks, Stephen. Catherine?
Hi there, thanks Paul, and hi everyone. It's great to see everyone here today, meet new people, and to see a few familiar faces too. My name's Catherine Manning and I'm the Operations Manager for Social Value UK. I'm also the Assurance Manager, so I run our assurance and accreditation services. Social Value UK, hopefully a few people have heard of us already, but for those that haven't, we're the professional body for people working in social value and social impact here in the UK. We're a national network of the global membership network Social Value International, sort of global movement for people working in social value and social impact around the globe. We're sort of first and foremost a membership organisation, and we work with people across the public, private and civil society. And as I sort of mentioned, we do assurance services, training and lots of other sort of membership type activities, guidance, networking events, all these sorts of things. So it's great to meet you all. Looking forward to the chats.
Fantastic. Thanks, Catherine. Jenny?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Jen Hartley, and like Catherine, I feel a bit left out because I've not got procurement in my title. I do wear two hats at the moment. So I am Director of Invest Newcastle, which is the organisation that works to attract inward investment and capital investment into Newcastle and Gateshead. So working with companies to locate their business and to grow their business and to stay in the city and the wider region. My other hat is that I'm interim head of economic development at Newcastle City Council. So I lead a sort of 22 strong team there, focused on everything from skills to business support to economies and policy, etc. So thanks again for having me.
Great, thanks, Jen. And what I'm going to do is just put a little bit of context around, why we wanted to host this meeting today, and then we've got some questions that I'm going to pose to the panel. And as I say, anybody who's kind of got anything that they want to raise around that, please raise your hand. I'll do my best to kind of bring you in. If we can answer it straight away, we will. If we can't, then we'll park that and we'll come back to you later. So, I mean, first and foremost, I think nobody could have predicted the events of the last 8, 9, 10 months and the impact that would have on the UK and the world, actually. When we first went out to talk about this webinar, I think we just at that point reported an economic contraction of 20% in the second quarter of 2020. Great timing in that, we've seen today that kind of economic recovery to a certain extent. So 15.5% growth July to September, but it is very clear that the future remains uncertain and that the damage of this from an economic perspective is going to be felt for years to come. I think it's safe to say that at Bloom, we recognise that the application of social value principles can have a real huge impact on organisations and supply chains and offers a significant opportunity to kickstart that recovery. I mean, alongside this, the Cabinet Office had issued Procurement Policy Note 0620, which places social value at the heart of awarding criteria for central government, which we absolutely applaud. That's fantastic, it's brilliant. But actually we feel at Bloom, and I know a view shared by many on the panel, that this is an approach that can benefit many other wider public sector organisations and the economy as a whole. I'm first going to hand over to Catherine Manning around kind of what, in your view, Catherine, considerations should the public sector be making to maximise their social value impact?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Paul. And I suppose first off, I'm really pleased to hear those social value principles being mentioned right up front. So I suppose sort of building on what I'd already said about the network, I'm coming at this from a completely cross-sectoral perspective, and as the UK network, everybody's a member of the network or sort of linked to the network, is coming together with a shared perspective of changing the way the world accounts for value, for us to be accounting for a much broader sense of value, social value, not just financial value. So we're thinking about social, environmental and economic. And the way that we're advocating that people to do that is through applying a principles-based approach. And so my first point would be to advocate for that, for the public sector, for commissioning and procurement. So there's a few points sort of linked to that, and the purpose of applying this principles-based approach is about standardization of practice rather than standardization of metrics, and another part of that is about the fact that this is about having accountability for the fact that if we are undertaking activities, no matter what we're working in, whether it's public, private or civil society, we are people and we're working with people and we're having an effect on people's lives, and we should have a level of accountability for that. And if we're in a position of being able to make decisions about what those activities are, then we're in a position of power, really, and we need to recognise that as well. There's a level of seriousness to that. So whatever decisions we make, they're going to have an effect on people's lives. And so we should almost be thinking of ourselves as a proxy for the people whose lives we're affecting. So how are we going to act in this position of power to make sure that we're making decisions that are going to have the best outcomes for the people whose lives that we're going to be affecting. So that would mean, best case scenario would be thinking about doing this in a community-led or stakeholder-led way, so that we're getting that community or stakeholder-led understanding of need. I suppose from a public sector perspective, there'd be different people who'd have the responsibility for that at different stages. So, at the beginning stage of sort of defining the need, is it the local authorities' responsibility at that point? I know there's some really great practice out there where obviously councils are doing that sort of practice already. Then once we're moving on to that contract award stage, does the responsibility then shift more onto the contractor? Perhaps yes. So there's that kind of shared responsibility there. Now, in that we obviously, to be able to kind of track that, we'd be needing to actually measure something, right? We need to measure to be able to track. So what we're actually measuring really matters, and defining what those measurements are matters. So perhaps we're not just looking at outputs, we're looking at outcomes. So what are the things that are actually changing in people's lives, not just number of people that have gained a job, but what kind of job? Is it a sustainable job? Is it something that they actually wanted and that is improving their lives? So there's some things like that. I suppose another thing, if anybody's ever heard anyone from SV UK speak before, we'd also be talking about unintended change and also negative change, right? I'm sure everybody on this call here today isn't out there planning to have negative impact on the communities that they're affecting, but that doesn't mean that we won't be. We could be having unintended negative effects, and we could also be having unintended positives. So we need to also be thinking about those things and think about how we're actually going to account for those and make sure that we are. We'd also talk a lot about focusing on aspects of well-being, and that can help us to move away from just looking at the outputs. Just a final kind of couple of points on this that we'd be kind of thinking about is that I suppose with all of this sort of measurement piece, we can end up focusing on the numbers, and it is absolutely necessary to have that quantification to be able to actually manage social value over time. But there is also the risk of focusing on the numbers so much that we're just focusing on gaining the biggest numbers, right? And it becomes that competitive kind of piece, trying to get the biggest number that we can, and that's something that we should all be aware of and cautious of, and saying, well, what do those numbers actually mean? What's the process we've been through to actually get to those numbers? And that's somewhere where I'd be highlighting assurance, external verification, checking standards of practice. And I suppose with my assurance manager hat on, you would expect me to raise something like that, but also linked to actually management of contracts over time. And I know that's something that people would be very much well, a lot more have a lot more understanding of, all the procurement specialists here than I, but it's certainly got to be a part of that contract management over time. So looking at it continuing to improve over time, but also checking what, where are these numbers coming from? What is it? What do they actually mean? And how are we improving? So I know the final kind of point sort of going to lead into more of this this discussion. Sort of practically, another area we certainly talk to a lot with our members is around who are you actually engaging with for contracts, right? Who are we working with collaboratively in our communities? And that's very much around sort of diversification of supply chains. So are we moving towards more social enterprises? Are we moving towards working with local and community-based organisations, and those that are working more directly with people in our own local areas? So yeah, that I think I'll stop there and pass on.
That's great, Catherine. Thank you. And I think really important points there. I think, from certainly coming at this from a Bloom perspective, considering that impact is absolutely at the heart of kind of what we do as an organisation. And Catherine also referenced there kind of the outcomes as well, and how we measure them. So actually, how do we measure the impact of what we're doing is really, really important. So I'm going to hand over to Sarah McNabb. Sarah, just wanted you to talk through a little bit about how Bloom as an organisation, how we're able to help public sector organisations engage with local supply chains.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much, Paul. I think to start with, and as a way of a bit of an introduction, I just wanted to talk a little about Bloom, NEPO, and sort of the NEPO framework. So Bloom are the delivery partner of NEPO for the NEPO 3 framework. And through the delivery of the contract, Bloom and NEPO have made sort of huge commitments around maximising social value and sort of working with stakeholders and understanding how they can have a huge benefit. So we have really evidenced this over the past year. We have created a lot of social value. We've worked with a lot of different stakeholders. We've kind of done things around volunteering, around donations, and really working with our local supply chain. So we've kind of made it in what our commitments are, but we are going to work through that over the next few years. I think the beauty of the NEPO solution is that it gives the public sector organisations the opportunity to really be able to access the best choice of suppliers within the local area. So we do have a really dynamic marketplace, which is consistent of over 2,500 local suppliers. And I think it's an important point to add as well that those suppliers change on a daily basis, the numbers change, because the nature of this framework is that we can onboard and register suppliers daily. There's no kind of cut-off point, so it gives everybody the opportunity to be able to engage with different suppliers on a sort of an ongoing basis. Really, since the start of the NEPO 3 contract back in September 19, we have awarded a significant amount of projects to local suppliers, and it's well over £100 million now, which is phenomenal, considering it is only a year into the contract. And it just goes to show that really the public sector are passionate about local suppliers. They're passionate about the spend and where the money is going, and how their suppliers really do play a huge part in the delivery of their outcomes within each of the areas. I do think sort of the way we work and facilitating a local supplier first approach is great, because it gives us the opportunity to engage with the customer, understand their social value requirements, identify shortlists of suppliers, and also that sort of approach to local supply chain, making sure that we are including at least one of those local suppliers within shortlists. Wherever possible. I mean, sometimes it isn't possible, and we do have to go out to other sources, and there are niche projects, but we will include local suppliers wherever possible. I think this process really does give local suppliers a chance to be on a level playing field with all of the suppliers as well. So it's not just larger suppliers that are getting the opportunities, it's medium, small, micro, third sector, and they're all sort of in a position to be able to put themselves forward, bid for opportunities, and hopefully be awarded them. And if they're not successful, they will receive feedback and sort of help them to progress and to work on the next sort of project. So we kind of touched a little bit upon social value and what it means and what it means to Bloom, but we are really extremely passionate about social value, and it really is inclusive of absolutely everything that we do. We do include it in our processes, within our policies and procedures, and it really does form part of all of our decision making process. I think the sort of social value flows right down to project level, and also forms part of discussions with our customers around social value, inclusion within their tender documentation, what it means to them, what they're trying to achieve, have they engaged with their stakeholders, do they really understand what they want out of this project, and how it really will benefit their communities. So following those conversations, we really do our utmost to engage with our market, let them know of the opportunities, and also guide them every step of the way. So they really are getting sort of the opportunities to work with the public sector, and a chance to really show what they can do.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. And I think, Darren, probably you can bring this to life a little bit from the Durham experience. I'm kind of really interested to hear from you around how Bloom and the NEPO framework have enabled Durham to deliver on your social value goals.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And it's interesting listening to Catherine and Sarah as well. Some really interesting points. I'm just listening to you then, Catherine, before I start. Every time I hear anybody from SV UK, the message is very consistent, and you're either all on message or you've trained Ben Carpenter quite well. So Ben's he's a big supporter of social value. He's a key member of our task force, and as us procurers who do like numbers and quantifying things and seeing pounds and impacts is one thing. Ben keeps us. He's always the angel on the shoulder to make sure it's the right kind of social value, and it's not social value for social value's sake. Anyway, we digress. Just a bit of background. I think it's important, before I explain about my experience from a Durham perspective and also from a NEPO perspective, is this is a real tricky area. Social value is a real tricky area in this category of spend. So I think if you look, if you've got a long contract, close working relationship, and you can work on a project over a long period of time, you can do a lot of good things. But I think we need to be mindful of this arrangement that we have. Some of the contracts are maybe a medium term, but a lot of these contracts are actually short, sharp pieces of very bespoke, specific work. So that brings an added complexity and challenge to things. So I think from my side, I think the efforts made by the colleagues at Bloom have been fantastic. Not only in terms of what they delivered, and I'll give you some examples of that, but the fact that they're trying to do this, because candidly, you know, I deal with a lot of professional services organisations. A lot of them put this in the too hard box. And I think Bloom have embraced the philosophy, the approach, and tried. And one of the things that sort of like gave me confidence in their, if you want, their thinking and sort of like made me realise this is part of their DNA, that this isn't just something nice that they think they should do, is that pre-procurement for NEPO 3, well before we were even talking about going to market, several people, some in this room came to see us and said, what does social value mean to you within this context and within this contract and in these circumstances? And as a result of that, Bloom went away and made a very strong bid. I mean, I wasn't part of the bid evaluation team at all. So they made a lot of commitments, and, I think fair play, because that was ambitious. It was going into a space that not a lot of professional services companies had tried to do. And as we'll explore, you've done really well. So in my world, I probably spend £4 to £5 million a year on specialist professional services of varying types. At any one time, I've probably got 60 projects on the go of different shapes and sizes. And if I reflect on the spend at Durham, when I set up the procurement organisation in 2009, the spend versus where it is now was about 30% higher. So due to government cuts and austerity that everybody has faced, and this was pre-COVID, with the cuts we've made, it's really important we maximise the value of every pound we spend for the community. Because when government cut your funds by 30%, you've still got services to deliver, and actually those service demands are increasing. Getting and extracting the maximum possible value for the community is really, really important. And Bloom have enabled us to do that, as well as a lot of the projects that Bloom work on help us to deliver social value outcomes anyway, by the nature of what they are. Whether, so for example, real example, we did a business case for a new headquarters on the river in Durham. So we worked with Bloom to procure that professional services support, and now the new headquarters is progressing really well. So that in itself, the work itself, helps you deliver social value outcomes within a locality. But if you look at some of the important indicators, for the last time I looked, and I do look regularly, trust me, I think about 88% of the spend was with small, medium, micro businesses. And that's really, really healthy in a context where central government have an aspiration to achieve 33%. So government think 33% is good, and they have an aspiration to achieve that, and there's some way away from that. So to actually have 88% already on the books with the work that they've done, I think is testimony to the work done. It's not just a narrative, this stuff is real and it's having an impact. And another increasingly important area is the third sector, the voluntary community, social enterprise, charity type organisations, where I think around about 9% of the supplier representation within Bloom is in that sector, and that's tremendous. And again, even more important when you realise the role that sector played from March through to now and continues to play. Their performance has been fantastic. So awarding contracts to those organisations is really, really helpful. We've seen local jobs, apprenticeship, volunteering hours and charitable donations, as you would expect. These things are quite common in this space when you're procuring things. But one of the things, well, two more things really that kind of resonated with me, the type of organisation Bloom are, is we have annual staff awards, and Bloom were quite assertive with us to say, well, can we get involved in that? Can we provide some sponsorship participation in that? And they sponsored awards, and they were particularly vociferous about they wanted to do it for young people and young learners. So, we've had some really good apprenticeships coming through, have been recognised by the council, and Bloom have been at those events. And another one that was really appreciated, particularly at times when budgets are tight, we have an annual foster carers event where we get all the people who very kindly foster young people across the county together to celebrate. But also we use it as a recruitment opportunity to try and inspire people to come along and get involved. And again, Bloom attended that event. They sponsored all of the awards and turned, you know, most candidly, an event that was historically probably a bit dry into something that was really meaningful, had a huge impact, and you know, we're really grateful for that. And again, back to picking on Catherine's point, numbers are important, outcomes are important, measurements are important, but you need to be a particular type of company to deliver the right kind of social value. And I know that the Bloom colleagues have worked very hard to, you know, with the support of Social Value UK, to get accreditation to, I think when I last looked, it was level 2, and you were pushing for level 3. So it isn't just about the numbers; it's about doing the right thing and doing good business. And you know, doing good business is a good thing to do. So I think overall, I was a bit sceptical about how we could extract social value out of this contract in any meaningful way. You made a big commitment and you are delivering it, but you can always do more. That's me.
Thank you. Thanks, Darren. I really appreciate that. And I think that, you know, just picking up on a few points that were raised there, you know, there are lots of very, very good examples of delivering and maximising social value across the public sector now. You know, yes, we are doing a lot of work around that. You know, from Sarah's perspective at Bloom, working really, really hard to deliver in that area. We work really closely with NEPO on that. But there are other examples out there as well across the UK. And I think from our point of view, we are absolutely committed to the idea that, you know, we can support those initiatives. So actually we want to be involved. We want to be kind of thought leaders in this area. We work very closely with Catherine and the team at Social Value UK. And I think, you know, Catherine can give some broader examples actually of where that impact has been felt. Just in terms of the wider kind of public sector and maximising local impact, I'm just going to bring Stephen in from NEPO to talk a little bit about, in his view, kind of how the public sector can ensure that maximum local impact of recovery plans.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, it's a really important subject. You know, Sarah, yourself and Darren have talked about NEPO and the way that can work with Bloom as a vehicle, but I guess the context that sits behind a lot of stuff is, you know, when we're thinking about recovery, the North East has the highest number of leftover neighbourhoods as defined by the all-party parliamentary group. The report that was released on the 20th of July gives some real kind of startling realities of the pressures of those living in our neighbourhoods face, and particularly the impact of COVID-19 on those communities. The report uses some of the socio-economic data to identify the high-level challenges for those that are in the kind of left-behind neighbourhoods, and it talks about inequalities and health impacts and high levels of clinical vulnerability, damage and economic impacts, the presence of vulnerable groups and their exposure to work and the communities and how they work in this situation. So the context of them which we're working in is quite stark particularly at the moment. So the way that we as NEPO, as in the 12 member authorities, through our social value review and our social value win, we've got the aim of maximising the value of every pound spent in the region. And there's many ways that we do that. We try and support and facilitate social value, being available for NEPO member authorities and NEPO associate members to call off from our collaborative procurement efforts. We incorporate the LGA national TOMs into procurements to ensure that commitments are contractual and therefore delivered as part of formal contract management processes, and NEPO would be a real example of that, and the really good work that the Bloom have delivered on already. Support with training of both suppliers and through the NEPO Business Club. And just as a kind of quick promo, there's a couple of events happening on the 18th and 25th of November that's specifically focused around the training of suppliers, and more information of that's available on the NEPO website. We support our regional procurement officers within the region to help with them to understand how they can get the best out of social value. And finally, we also have the North East Social Value Group as Darren says, chaired by Darren, there's a kind of a LinkedIn group that's available for people to join around that. So there's some of the things that we do just to try and make sure that social value is not a thing that sits on a shelf, and it's not a thing that we refer to every time and again. It's something that absolutely is kind of embedded to everything we do, because we know that there's a key role that we can all play, participants in this meeting as well, in terms of maximising social value opportunities.
It's great, Stephen. Thank you. Really appreciate that. And I think that notion of maximising the value of every pound is kind of at the heart of this. Where will that pound go, and what will it do for local communities? What will it do for the broader economy? And that's something that I think probably, Jen, you could relate to in your role at Newcastle. I'm interested to kind of get your views from a very sort of practical standpoint around how you're looking at this from a Newcastle perspective, both City Council and the Invest Newcastle angle.
Yeah, so I do come at this at a slightly different angle to the other panelists. And social value is a key part of everything that we're aspiring to at the moment as a city council. It comes as no surprise that the fundamentals of the city and regional recovery plans are centered around being equal, being sustainable, being fully inclusive. We all know that the most recent pandemic has not been equal, and that it has affected some of the most disadvantaged communities across our patch. If we look at the public health figures at the moment, there is a really stark contrast between some of our most disadvantaged wards and others. So it's really important for us to make sure that any practical steps that we're taking covers these inequalities. Now, as a city, we are driven by this, inclusivity and fairness. From my investment point of view, which is part of the kind of the economic recovery of the city, we've more and more so started working with investors, both on the corporate sides, but also capital investors, who are interested in the positive social impact that they're going to have in the city. So, we work with large public sector bodies who are looking at creating thousands or moving thousands of jobs into the city, and we're very much in line with social value impact assessments to make sure that what they are investing in is not only value for money, but is having a really positive effect. We also work with institutional investors that, and we're hearing this term quite a lot at the moment, inclusive capitalism. So organisations that aren't just interested in, the rental values that they're going to get from, building a shiny new property in the centre of Newcastle, but how are they going to embed themselves in the communities? How are they going to, work with the voluntary organisations? How are they going to help us to reach our net zero, plans? So we're really interested in working with those types of companies more and more. And of course, well-being of staff is a key part of what we're looking at the moment. At North of Tyne level and across the region, we've got things such as the Good Work Pledge, that any new company that I'm speaking to that wants to come and invest has to sign up to our Good Work Pledge and be part of those wider visions. And then how do we make sure that those companies that are coming in are creating jobs locally, and not just the direct jobs, but the indirect jobs, and how are they embedding themselves within the localized supply chain? So these are all issues that are really key to the work that I'm involved in. And as I say, slightly different angle from what some of the other speakers, what Darren and Catherine and Sarah and Stephen are coming across. But I just wanted to point out as well that the work that we've been doing with Bloom and NEPO, and it's not just down to us giving you members of our staff, may I say, who may be on this call now, but we've really enjoyed building a relationship. We were due to go out to a large property conference back in March, where we were going to be speaking to investors about this very thing, about social value and about the impact that the region, the positive impact that the North East region is really keen to see in investment. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, but hopefully it will happen next June, fingers crossed.
It's great, Jen, thank you. And I think actually kind of what you've outlined there is some of the really kind of practical steps that you're taking in your role to kind of maximize that impact locally. I've not jotted a few things down where we were talking there, but this notion of fairness and absolutely working in collaboration is so important. Developing those partnerships with investors, with suppliers, with buyers, with local communities and local stakeholders absolutely kind of has to be at the heart of all of this. So really appreciate that insight. Darren, I'm just going to go across to you. I'm just interested from your point of view, any kind of thoughts that you've got around the public sector, and I guess broader than Durham, but actually in your kind of broader roles around maximising that local impact of recovery plans.
Yeah, I think I think we need to reflect on what's gone on and where we are and what's changed. Councils in general across the country have worked tirelessly throughout this pandemic and performed amazingly well. And anything that was in government's too hard box ended up in the lap of councils to deliver outcomes at short notice. But what's been even more amazing for me is the response from the third sector and the communities who've actually come together to work collaboratively. And it's kind of, it was kind of collaboration out of necessity. Not, normally, you have to plan these things and encourage people to get together and try and build relationships. But relationships got people got put together in difficult circumstances, collaborated out of necessity. And I think things have changed forever. I really, really do. And I think for the positive. And I think we need to reflect on particularly the role that local government can make, because we're the conduit, we're the connectors, we can bring people together. We've been working obviously on restoration, which is getting stuff going again after it all closed down. And now we're looking at recovery, and social value is crucial to all of this more than ever before. I think anybody who didn't get social value before the pandemic, they've got to get it now, because I think you can clearly see the opportunities. And one of the things I'm working on nationally, but also locally, is I'll term it for now place-based social value for ease of explanation. Some people call it local wealth creation or local wealth development and so on. But I think the public sector need to come together stronger to make more effective use of their local pound. So what does that mean in the real world? In my world, that means police, fire, health, housing, schools, academies, church. The church have got a significant amount of land that can do good things. So try to create more closer collaborative networks where we can help each other deliver the outcomes that the community wants. And again, I would argue with those public sector providers, and you can bring major private sector organizations into that conversation as well, of course. But if you look at those partners, they know what the community needs, they know what the problems are, and they've probably got ideas working with the third sector and other local suppliers on how to solve them. But I think we also need to reflect on PPE. I never ever thought I would work so hard and talk so much and lose so much sleep over masks, gloves, aprons and stuff like that, right? We, people like me, have outsourced, have offshored for low prices for several years in this category. COVID happens, China shuts down, we've got no PPE. Right now, all right, if you'd have done a risk assessment a couple of years ago and said, what would be the biggest crisis for supply chains in the UK? PPE wouldn't have been at the top of your list. So I think we need to reflect on that. And I think we need to think about a more diverse and a more sustainable supply chain on the stuff that we procure and we get involved in. And I think, you know, there's some of the conversations I'm having now about, well, what's next and what else might go wrong, and where are the risks, but also what are the opportunities? Because I do think, you know, a lot of global private sector organizations are talking about sourcing more locally. Councils and public bodies are talking about sourcing more locally. You know, we're having conversations, like even in Durham, about a Durham make strategy. So manufacturing could be a real resurgence there in certain key areas where we've got specialities. And obviously there's the climate change impact as well. So most councils have declared climate change emergency. So again, social value work will contribute to that. And I think there's light at the end of the tunnel, because it would be remiss of me not to mention some of the national work I'm doing. I can't go into details because I wouldn't want to steal the thunder of government and Dominic Cummings particularly. But there is new policy statement pending, and that new policy statement will place I won't go too far with my comments. We will have to consider how, when we procure, we're taking into account certain national objectives. Social value is at the heart of that. So, you know, those people who understand the Public Service Social Value Act and have embraced it, but actually there's only a duty to consider, I think will be very pleased about what's coming on the horizon. And that will be encouraging and asking public sector procurers, all public sector procurers, not just councils, to have regard for new business, new jobs, SMEs, VCSEs, social value, net zero, climate change. So all of those issues are very much what social value is about. So even central government are starting to get this, and you saw that obviously with the PPN 0620 that got released a few weeks ago, that gets implemented formally Jan 1 with a minimum of 10% requirement in their weighting. So I think from a social value point of view, things augur really well. The opportunities are immense.
Thank you, Darren, and thanks for the sneak peek as well. So I could see lots of nodding and smiling. So yes, I think that you know, clearly the backdrop of, you know, central government and government guidance around social value will help to drive things forward. But I think, you know, it is in the ownership of individuals in this meeting and the broader kind of public sector community to really embrace social value and kind of make that a fundamental part of everything that we do. And I think that's, you know, certainly where Bloom come at it from. I think just want to wrap up now, conscious of time. So I'm going to get some kind of closing remarks from the panel. Catherine, I'm going to pass to you based on kind of what we've talked about today. Obviously, you kind of introduced. We talked a bit about impact. It was really good to kind of get your insight and set the context around this. But how do you think, from your point of view, kind of that local first approach to procurement, how do you believe that's going to really kind of give an impact to local economies?
Yeah, thanks for that. Well, it's been wonderful to be able to listen to everybody speaking on the panel here today, and I have to say I'm really pleased Darren said that we all sound like we're on the same page when we speak from Social Value UK. That's very reassuring. But I just sort of picking out a couple of things in there that that point that we're all learning is hugely important to remember, and it's something we talk about across the SV UK network as a whole all of the time, right? We came on here and saying that we're all experts, right? We're all a community, and we're working together in trying to push forward this social value movement. I think that sort of community feeds in nicely to my next point around this local agenda. People have mentioned about the diversification of supply chains and bringing that down to sort of community-based organisations, local organisations, VCSE organisations. I think that's fantastic to see, right? That's bringing us back down to people who are working directly with people right at a local level, and local councils, like Darren has highlighted, having to really, I suppose, that increase visibility during this time of how integral that local councils are in terms of the effect that they have on all of our lives, and we've all absolutely felt that during this time. But the other thing that's got to be highlighted with that is that all of these local organisations, they're not working in isolation from one another. So the collaborative piece and working together has got to be recognised, and it's got to be something that we focus on. And I think that's really important from a social value perspective, right? That we recognise that in terms of the practice that we're actually doing, and we're muddling through trying to measure and manage, but also in the fact that to be able to have the best outcomes that we're going to have on a local perspective, we've got to work together. I suppose there's only one sort of cautionary point that we talk to everybody about in terms of that kind of local perspective, is that can't be the only factor to say local, it means good, right? There's got to be other things in that you say, well, it's a local organisation, but is the work that they're doing, are the jobs good? Is it actually working in a way that's bringing the best community outcomes that it can? I think that was something that Sarah had raised initially around the Bloom sort of approach, that where possible always include a local supplier. But actually, if you're looking at those what's most important locally, perhaps there's times where actually a different supplier is also appropriate. And also what counts as local, you know, when do you go outside of that boundary? So that collaboration piece might also mean not just my local patch, but what are we doing across those sort of boundaries as well. So I'll pause there.
That's brilliant, Catherine. Thank you. Really appreciate that, kind of put it in the procurement context from our perspective. And I think just Stephen, I'll go across to you. Just kind of any practical things. You did talk about some of the things like the business club that NEPO run, kind of other initiatives. But how do you come at this from a NEPO perspective?
I think, well, from a NEPO perspective and from, I guess, the local authorities that we represent, social value done right will be about reducing pressures on local authorities and, you know, the services that they deliver. And done right, it's about, you know, providing opportunities, apprenticeships, work placements, business sponsored support, mental wellbeing groups, community groups, etc. I think from a NEPO point of view, you know, we're a public buying organisation and we abide by the public contract regulations, and the world that we work in is going to shift to some degree as a result of Brexit. More NEPO have had an opportunity to feed into the green paper that's going to come out. You know, there's no doubt that equal and fair treatment of bidders is going to be completely at the forefront. I'm really interested to see the detail and how that lands. And I guess from a NEPO point of view, we look at both tier 1 suppliers and the supply chains, and we try and squeeze as much social value as possible out of the delivery of those contracts. And we realise and champion that doing the right thing is a space that is both the right thing to do and it's also good for the bottom line, because we're increasingly seeing that talented young people want to work with ethical companies that work with, you know, they're making the right kind of career decision choices, and they're really interested in companies that are saving energy, reducing waste, having a positive impact on the financial bottom line. Can be something that really lands well with those that are kind of looking and seeking out their next opportunity, and this can be a real kind of asset to the great chances of successful public sector bids for companies that embrace that mindset into the way that they deliver themselves, not only how they present themselves in future tender opportunities. So encourage everyone really to really look at it from that perspective and use that in the work that we put forward.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stephen. And I'm just going to, before kind of wrap up, just get some final comments from Jen and from Darren. So Jen, just over to you. Any kind of further thoughts? You talked a lot about kind of collaboration and how that works and the impact that has on your roles. Any kind of final closing remarks from you?
Yeah, well, I suppose very briefly, we're very new to social value, and it's taken me a while more recently to understand what it actually means. But to really get my head around it, it's like Stephen just said, it kind of it all makes sense. We all know that a more productive economy and profitable economy will be generated by improving people's health, their well-being, their climate. What is good for us as a person is good for the economy and is good for the climate. And I do think we will see a sort of a drive. We're seeing it at the moment, while on lockdown, sort of a drive for people to shop independently, to shop with the local independents. And I think people are looking to do that more and more. So I think it shouldn't be rocket science. And I think, as Stephen said, more people, more businesses are wanting to work with more ethically charged businesses as well. So as much as we can do in the public sector to help to push that, and the proof will be seen in a more productive and a more profitable economy.
Great, thank you, Jen. And Darren, if you got any final words from yourself?
Couple of points. First time today that's happened. You're on mute. I think a couple of things is just encourage people buy side and supply side to engage with Bloom in within this spend category. With this particular with Bloom, you've got an opportunity to do good social value things that might ordinarily not be possible if you're buying contract by contract with individual routes. But listening to the some of the ethical things, some of the cynics might just say this is a public sector thing. This is nice words and doesn't really impact on the private sector. I've got 2 kids who are in the Generation Z category, and if you actually analyse, and look at some of the data about those young people and how they think and what their moral compass is like, very, very different than mine at that age. And young people are making far more morally right, ethically right decisions in their purchasing choice. And even if that means, in some cases, it doesn't in the public sector world, but even if that means paying more. So I think there's something to think about there. Now, just a final point about local. Local is good, but we can't buy rubbish. Okay, so there's an obligation on the supply side here to ensure that they perform, because there's nothing worse. If I'm looking straight into the eye of my council leader or deputy leader and telling them I've got a great local supplier here, but the performance is rubbish, there'll be some difficult conversations. So we can't source local if the capability is not there. So we need people to engage, we need people to develop, we need people to improve, so that we've got a very, very strong local supply base. And for me, social value, it's really, really simple. Doing good is good business. That's it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Darren. I really appreciate that. And I think just to wrap up on time, I'm pleased to say, I just want to thank everybody who's come along today. And I really hope that you found kind of today's conversations insightful. We don't unfortunately have time for questions, but if you would like to submit a question, then please feel free to do so after this webinar. You can send that through to hello@bloom.services. So if you do have a question, please feel free to push that through. We will liaise with the panel and get you an answer back. Really appreciate the panel's time today. Really, really insightful. Lots of different kind of points of view coming at this from different angles. So once again, thank you very much for your time. Thanks all for attending. Really appreciate that. A recording will be available early next week, and that will be shared with you. So please feel free to share with colleagues. Thanks again, and everybody stay safe. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.